So first, Justin, big welcome to Stagwell Sport Beach.
Thank you.
And a big welcome to the 4As.
Thank you very much.
You were announced with great acclaim and anticipation just about 6 weeks ago.
Right.
Relatively new.
Relatively
in
new.
rule, but certainly not new to the industry by any means.
No.
So first, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Tell me, how has the first 6 weeks been for you?
It's been great. It's been first 6 weeks has been about listening, understanding. I knew the 4As. I'd worked with the 4As previously. I believe the work they do is very important, especially at this time in the industry, which I'm sure we'll get to. And so I decided, as I always do, that as you go into a role, you have to listen to understand what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, why they saw something in me to put me and give me this opportunity. So a lot of listening, a lot of talking with my executive leadership team, also talking with the staff at large, sharing who I am. So a lot of exchange humanly. This is what I am. This is what I represent. This is what I hope to bring. So trying to make myself accountable from sort of day one, because I think people respond to that. And inviting an exchange with people at all levels of the association. So it's been 6 weeks of that, and I've really enjoyed it.
And what compelled you to this role? You are an entrepreneur, you are a founder, you have worked and led multiple agencies. What was the thing that attracted you to the company and to the role?
I think there are two things. The first is that I believe in the work of the 4As, and I believe that in the time that we're in, with as much disruption, many things are changing at a speed that I don't think the industry's seen. There was an opportunity for a fresh look of what an association does and how it helps agencies in their day-to-day. I thought that could be compelling, fun, different. And the other thing that that really appealed to me was the ability to have impact in that role. So as a consequence of that, you can have broader impact in what you do. And you know, the 4As is 108 years old. And my role, I see, my responsibility is to provide a platform that there'll be another 108 years. And I think
will you still be leading in 108 years?
That's not going to happen, I can assure everyone. But what I will say is, I think that sort of accountability appeals to me. You mentioned I've been an entrepreneur and I've been 32 years running agencies around the world. And I've combined both, and I just love accountability. So I think those two reasons, you know, changing industry, how can you reimagine what an association is, and then making sure that everything we do is having an impact.
Well, one of the things we had talked about earlier, Justin, was the evolving portrait of agencies. So there was a time when the catalog would be big-scaled agency, mid-market agency, and kind of boutique indies.
Right.
You have a different definition of what different kind of portraits of agencies look like. Can you talk a little bit about that, especially in the contemporary context of where we are right now?
Of course. Well, I think you still have at the top end, the scale end, you still have the holding companies. I think they'll still remain, but as we're seeing now, sort of before us, they are consolidating. There's been divesting. There's been a lot of things that have happened to change the scope and the scale of a holding company. I think that will continue on. Then you have sort of the large independents, if you will, and actually between the two, you have sort of the new types of holding companies. There are a few who I've had the benefit of talking with in the last sort of 2 years, who want the scale. They're more technology driven and technology built as part of their DNA. So they don't do technology through acquisitions, they do it through that's who we are. And they look at models of engaging clients that are much more rapid. They look for different types of engagement models. So whereas a holding company likes the retain model, they're quite happy with project-based engagements, this new type of holding company. So, and then you've got the independents behind them. And then you have an array of new types of agencies where I think previously you'd say they were small independents, but now these are much more agile, technology-led. Sometimes they're pretty vertical. So they have a specialism. The influencer agency is a great example of that. And if you were to plot all of these types of agencies, it's a very different ecosystem to even 10 years ago. And I think understanding that and having the fortune to speak with many of these people, I really felt that there's an opportunity for an association like the 4As to really help the American agency ecosystem in new ways, exciting ways, and to sort of reimagine what that looks like.
And I would say for Stagwell is kind of one of those organizations where it's a challenger, organization that
100%.
occupies this really interesting space.
It's a very interesting space.
Can we talk, Justin, a little bit about AI? Because
Yes.
a conversation can't happen without those two letters being mentioned.
Of course.
But in terms of one of the questions that I think agencies get often
Yep.
is, how is AI going to impact our compensation models?
Yep.
Right, especially when it comes to multi-year partnerships. How are you seeing AI play out in terms of the type of next generation talent that is going to be kind of really driving a different makeup of
Right.
what the talent composition is going to look like 5, 3,
Yep.
7 years from now?
Great question, and I'm glad you asked. So AI, I would say it's already at play, having that impact from a talent perspective. I think agencies, you can look at AI in so many ways. I tend to look at it in 3 ways, right? It can affect what you do, your operational model, if you will, your workflow. It can affect what you make, so the creative production side of things, and it can affect the intelligence and the research and insights that you have pre-work and also post-work to measure. So there's 3 very simple ways of understanding where does AI play. And what I would say is that a lot of discussion has been on the workflow as it relates to talent.
Sure.
So we're going to need less entry-level people coming into agencies because AI will do that work. And then to your point of what are the new skill sets or the new types of talent you need? Because now the AI, we hear about it being your co-pilot. So you're going to have the skills to get the best out of it. You're going to co-create with your agent or your platform. And I think some of those things are true. What I will say is that I do believe there will always be a need for the best human talent, but I don't think it's absurd to think that that talent will change shape. It will change seniority, and it will also have to have a very ongoing, always-on view to upskilling. Because we can see how much AI is moving and advancing, new platforms, new technologies, new ways, new systems. Someone has to learn that. If that's going to be your co-pilot, you've got to keep learning that, especially if these systems are able to augment themselves, right? So there's going to be a need for a much more hands-on, always-on view of talent strategy. And people are going to start to talk about human capital management. They talk about talent. Human capital management was like a business term, but in the realms of how an agency needs to continue to get the best out of investments of technology, you need to make sure your human investment is at pace. And so there's going to be a different shape. There's going to be potentially less entry level. There'll be more ongoing upskilling, and it's going to put a focus on agencies to really have a talent strategy, to really have a human capital management or HCM strategy. What are we investing in training? What are we investing in tools? How are we making sure that our agency proposition is moving forward with AI completely integrated? So it's going to be a mixture. It's going to be a mixture of the two. It's going to be exciting, and I think the progressive challenger networks are maybe well placed to define what that looks like.
And so on that point, and to just zoom out a little bit, some say that the kind of the established holding companies are going through somewhat of an existential crisis right now. Consolidation,
Right.
centralization, simplification, all of which are good words,
Right.
good ambitions. What happens when, are there any casualties or risks that you would provide counsel to that part of our kind of agency ecosystem in terms of how we balance human capital and culture, preservation of culture, relative to responses in short-term,
Right.
long-term business
Right.
opportunities?
Well, look, I think I would agree that what you see in the holding companies is necessary, and I think it's positive. I think everyone, especially if you've been in the industry as long as I have, you know that that's needed to happen, and it's been happening over time. There's just been a very stark acceleration in the last 12 to 18 months, and I think that's good, right? I do believe, though, if you think about our industry, one of the things that our industry is known for, and I'm passionate about, is the culture that the talent brings, the energy, the points of view, the connectivity to what's happening in the world, and bringing that through in the work. And I think that's something that we need to preserve in the industry. I don't think because you're a holding company, suddenly you're going to be miles away from that, but I do think you've got to make sure that's part of, as they consolidate and almost redefine who they are, they need to keep that front and center, that connectivity, because that's where great work comes from. Great work doesn't come from amazing processes and great technology on their own. It comes from the human insight that goes into that and is manifested. So I would say that if I was part of any holding company consolidation, keeping yourself culturally connected to what's happening in the world and giving your people the ability to show that and express that in the work they do is going to be critical to delivering great work for clients. And I'm all about great work for clients.
Yeah. And you are clearly, Justin, someone who is a leader that shows up with accountability. You used that word accountability quite a bit earlier. You're present. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about what are some of the kind of signature Justin leadership characteristics?
I think it's high energy is one. I love being with people that give out energy. You take that. You also, my mother always told me to be polite, so you give back, right? I think energy is one. I think having a broader view. So seeing beyond what you're actually doing is one of my trademarks. So what's next? What could that be? Where do we think we could take that idea? I think that's another thing. I think building teams, having a real strong team ethos is very important. And when I say team ethos, I mean like safe spaces where people feel they can do their best work. I think that's a characteristic. And I think I would say just being expansive and global. So, of course, the 4As is really driving the American Association of Advertising Agencies. But as I've said to the board and to people internally, we have an influence across the world. 40% of spend through our industry is done in the US, right? That's not a small number. That's over $400 billion. So we always also have to think globally. Even though we are concerned about America and the US, we must think globally about how does this impact how other regions are seeing advertising, how brands are seeing advertising. So thinking beyond self and thinking globally is another characteristic, I would say. And
those are kind of new, potentially new focus areas for the 4As.
Potentially.
Yes, potentially.
I think, listen, I would say that Marlon and the team have started some great work. I mean, just this morning we had a debrief. We did some research with Forrester on how AI is being adopted within agencies. That this is the second year, so it's the second wave of this research. We want to keep on investing in those types of conversations, but there's an opportunity to think, okay, how do we disseminate that? What does the service model look like that everyone sees that? How do we engage conversations with agencies of all types around that? And so that's where we can build on some of the great work that's been done and move it forward. And then there are just some net new opportunities of if the agency ecosystem is changing, how do we make sure that the 4As is relevant during those changing moments? How are we going to make sure we retain our place? Right. It's not a given. It's really not a given because many of these new types of agencies they don't think about associations and they don't think about the ecosystem. They're thinking about winning and they're thinking about their communities. They're thinking about what they bring to the table. So it's a very different mindset. And when you spend time with them, you see that it's not arrogance and hubris. It's really how they think that they have to achieve and get on in the world. So that puts the onus on the 4As to make sure that we are front foot, we're proactive, and we are creating that relevance.
You had talked earlier, Justin, about we're not here to just enable conversations.
Right.
We're really here to lead those conversations.
Right.
In closing, did anything surprise you? You're like, oh.
Well, it's almost like the flip side of what I've just said. Agencies are very competitive. They're known to be such. What surprised me was just talking to our members, how much there is an openness and a willingness to share. And you wouldn't normally associate that with agencies because everything's
We
like,
tend to be very competitive.
we do our thing
Yes.
and you're not part of our tribe.
Yes, yes.
But if you can create the right environment, the willingness to share, and for everyone to rise up and move forward, whether it's AI, whether it's looking at the cost of the pitch, whether it's looking at remuneration models, they're willing to share on things that really matter. And that was a nice surprise because therein lies another opportunity of how the 4As can drive new relevance.
Fantastic. Justin, thank you so much for
Thank you, Jill.
joining us here at Stagwell Sport Beach. I look forward to working closely with you and have a fantastic camp.
Thank you so much.
Thank
it's been
you.
a pleasure. Excellent.